revelled in their girls, and Princess Margaret was observed as saying in your book that she'd never seen a grandchild, as talking about King Charles, as devoted to a grandparent as he was with her mother.
Well, I think certainly they had a very close relationship, to the point that, I mean, bearing in mind...
Well, he brought Charles and Anne up.
That's what I think,
I remember William Tallant, who was her sort of faithful, loyal servant, saying that we brought up Charles and Anne.
Because they were always away on royal tours, and children didn't travel then. And also they were being schooled at home by governesses.
Absolutely, and I think, interestingly, just with that tie back to the Bowes-Lyon upbringing that she had, she did have a bit of a kerfuffle with Prince Philip about the choice of school for the then Prince Charles, because she very much wanted him to go to Eton, where all her brothers had gone, and her father. And also it was so close to Windsor, and Prince Philip wanted him to go to Gordonstoun, which and he won out in the end.
How did she get on with Prince Philip?
Up to a point, I'd say.
Yes, I think that's... Yeah, I was going to
that sort of thing she'd say, up to a point, my dear. Yes.
Because when they married, the Queen insisted that her mother move out of Buckingham Palace and gave her residence at Clarence House, and she didn't go easy.
She did not go quietly into the night, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. And I think, I mean, you've obviously written recently about Prince Philip, and I think they were two very strong personalities. She had a much softer approach, I think, to parenting.
So actually that would have put her very much in the same sort of ballpark as a parent as, say, Princess Diana, and yet the two of them didn't hit it off.
Last time I spoke to Diana, I was writing something about the Queen Mother, I think. So I particularly asked her, and she said, don't think she was as nice as she pretends to be. She said, she and my grandmother did not make our romance. Charles and I made that ourselves. She was really cross.
What do you think the tension with them was?
Well, the Queen Mother couldn't understand anyone that, what she called, it's a wonderful old-fashioned expression, wash their dirty linen in public. And she was completely horrified, completely and utterly horrified by the Panorama interview. I mean, she was, and also the way that Diana criticised her grandson. Yeah.
What do you think she would have made of Camilla? And was she aware of Camilla? She must have been at some point, surely.
She was very good. The Queen Mother's one of her closest friends was Andrew Parker Bowles' father.
Right.
Very, very close friends. So the Parker Bowles and Camilla would go and stay at Burke Hall. So they were quite close. But then, of course, when Camilla and Charles made it more formal, she was not pleased at all, and Charles never would have married Camilla had his grandmother been alive.
Is that right? Because obviously, famously, she intervened and got the Queen Elizabeth II, to intervene when Margaret was considering marrying a divorced man.
She had quite an interesting policy when it came to Margaret and Townsend, which is that she veered between pretending it wasn't happening and prophesying doom to Margaret, the worst possible. You won't have a home, you'll have no income, what will happen? And Prince Philip quite famously said...
I love that too, yes.
He said, you can still buy a house today. And the Queen Mother was not amused. She got up and slammed the door.
Plenty more still to come on the Royal Beat collection, but first, here's what else you can watch on True Royalty TV.
Join me, Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen, on The Royal Beat Back in Time as I dive into the history books with expert guests to uncover the scandals and secrets of the monarchy in years gone by. Queen Victoria's relationship with men delves into her close bond with Lord Melbourne and also her tense interactions with William Gladstone. Look back at the spectacular splendour when kings and queens are crowned in the history of coronations. He was the ultimate, and some would say the original royal rock star. Find out more about his dramatic life in The Duke of Monmouth, the Royal Rebel. You can watch all episodes of The Royal Beat Back in Time only on True Royalty, the home of Royal TV.
You're watching the Royal Beat collection.
Wallis and Elizabeth. Is there any truth in the fact that there was beef between them because they were both trying to gauge the affections of Edward at a similar time?
No, I don't think that's the root of the problem. I think the root of the problem is that they did not trust a woman who had 2 living husbands. That's the key to all of it. You know, divorce was not really available for women at the time. And if Wallis was able just to ditch her husband and marry Edward, and they really feared blackmail. They just didn't know what she was about. They blamed Wallis for all Edward's behaviour, and I think we need to turn the tables a little bit, but they blamed Wallis for teaching Edward to lie. Well, he was quite capable of it without Wallis's help. They thought that, you know, she was only after his money, and with 2 living husbands, this was going to be a disaster for the country. And they could see that, you know, that he was going to stop at nothing until he married her.
Queen Mother famously referred to Wallis as the lowest of the low.
Quite wrong, though. You know, part of the misinformation campaign. Wallis came from a good family.
I remember someone tried to say, I don't think that she really hated her, and I was like, she did. She did hate her. I mean, there was a bit when during the war years, when they were going to send, they did send Edward as the governor to the Bahamas. And Elizabeth said, you know, I don't really think it's fair to give her the HRH for this, because then the other governors' wives would have to curtsy to her, and that's really too much to ask.
Oh, well, not giving her the HRH was the masterstroke, because effectively they were always exiles, because Edward said, why should I bring my wonderful wife back to England to see her humiliated? Nobody will curtsy to her. So that really was a very clever thing to do, but Wallis and Edward never forgave
Well,
them
she
for
also,
that.
I mean, Elizabeth also overheard Wallis doing impressions of her. Which did not land. It landed like the Hindenburg, I would say.
Yes, that was probably the...
That didn't help either.
I think she was also frightened at that point that it might not last.
Yes.
That there might be a king's party, that, you know, this glamorous couple across the sea, they might come back. In 37, it wasn't obvious that the British would take to Elizabeth, as indeed they did, and the war only cemented all of that and showed what a courageous, patriotic woman she was, in contrast to Wallis, who was always complaining about, you know, how awful we've been pushed out to this backwater. So it shifted. But if you actually look at 37, she was really quite worried at that point that maybe this glamorous couple might unseat them. I think there was a real fear.
Do you think, Anne, that that's why she really never fully warmed to Winston Churchill?
That absolutely played into it. You're completely right, because right up until 1941, really, well, when Churchill was fighting an existential war and believed that Wallis and Edward were defeatist and really dangerous and needed to be pushed out, Churchill had supported Edward. He believed that, you know, he was monarch, he should be allowed to choose an American wife if he wanted one. So, yes, I think all of that is part of it.
The war became the making of her as the queen in the eyes of the nation, did it not? The fact that she didn't leave town, that she stayed with her girls so she could look the East End in the eye.
Yeah, she said, you know, it was not a difficult choice between exile and death. She would have died. It was not a tough choice for her at all. And actually, one of the military historians I spoke to said, you know, they had this plan to evacuate the Coates mission.
That was really interesting.
Yeah, to get them out of... if the Nazis landed, they did not want the British royal family, Churchill in particular, did not want the royal family being captured in the way the Danish and Belgian royal family had been. He wanted them out so that they could act as a beacon for resistance in the way the Dutch and the Norwegian royals had. The Coates, who was in charge of the mission, said the Queen is expected to put up hefty resistance, and they sort of thought they might have to knock her out. And the Queen Elizabeth had a very different plan. And Churchill found her in the gardens of Buckingham Palace when they were expecting the invasion by the Nazis, and she was shooting rats with pistols. And her plan was that if the Nazis landed, she was going to load up 2 pistols and charge down, trying to take them out. And she said, I hope to take out a few of them before they take me out. So she was sort of this sort of suicidal, regal Annie Oakley going through London. That was her plan.